Thank you so much, Nay, for sharing that beautiful film. And Father David said it right. It is both, there's tragedy, but also some hope and levity in the just coming of age. So thank you for sharing that with us. You all met me last night. I'm Ryann Heim, our Director of Programming at Windrider. Let me start with, so this was a project with NYU as an NYU student, and now you're a professor there. Tell me about how the idea developed, and how does it reflect your own growing up?
So I moved to New York about 7 years ago, something like that, and this project was my thesis film. There was a time in my third year, I had finished kind of the bulk of the studies there, and it was time to start preparing for my thesis film, and that was a time when in Lebanon a revolution broke out in 2019, in October 2019, against like oppressive systems and everything that's been happening. And I used to be the person in Lebanon who would like go to the protest, be on the ground, try and that's, I think, from my upbringing. From when I was very young, I used to go to the streets with my parents and like try to participate in protests. So it was very hard to be so far away and to be in New York at that time and like trying to participate however possible, but it was very far. And it was definitely the biggest protest, which is why we called it a revolution, that we've ever seen in Lebanon. It was, everyone took down to the streets, everyone was fighting what was happening. And it was clear that whatever future is coming is going to be a big question mark, and there might be something very dangerous or very hopeful that might happen. So beyond like, there's hope, but there's also a lot of fear. And I had back then, 10-month-old niece, and I was just mostly worried about, how is she going to be brought up in Lebanon right now? Like, she's just starting her life. What will the future be like? And in that moment, it hit me. I'm like, that's actually what my parents went through when I was a kid. And I grew up in Lebanon at a time when there were a lot of bombs and political assassinations in the early 2000s, and I'm sure our parents were freaking out, but at some point it unfortunately became second nature for us, where we're like, oh, there's a whole week of nothing happening, then we can go out, or maybe we can't, or something will happen. And our parents are always like, you have to be careful, you can't just sneak off and do whatever you want to do. But we're teenagers, we're 14-year-olds who don't really know better, and at that point you're just like, I want to live my life. And I started writing Ebb Flow, and it was from two different perspectives, from the perspective of the teenagers that were trying to find their way through and like live their adolescence, but also I understood that it was the first time that I could see the parents' perspective as an adult now. So yeah, that's kind of how it came to be.
It's beautiful. You can see the worry of the parents and how real it is, how true the fear is based in truth, things to be afraid of, but also the wanting to find freedom as a young person and grow up. And the actors in this were just beautiful. You did an incredible job finding them. Tell me about how you found these young people who played the role so beautifully.
They were incredible to collaborate and work with, honestly. It was a bit of a challenge because Aya, who plays Jana, the best friend, I had, before moving to New York, I worked in Lebanon for a while, and I had worked with her on, I was ADing a TV show, and she was much younger back then, and I just remembered how good she was, and I reached out to her immediately. And we tried to workshop both characters, but she was more comfortable playing the best friend's character. And I had someone else lined up for Donna, Lolwa, the main character, but that fell through 2 weeks before production. And when you cast teenagers, you cast their parents as well. And it was a matter of, are the parents comfortable with the subject? Yeah, and they're Aya is, so Jana, the Jana character, she's 17, and Lulwa is actually 21, our lead. Well, she was 21 when we shot. So we were looking for someone who was much younger, but didn't work out eventually. And then I met Lulua, and she was great. Like she could read the nuances that I kind of forgot about when I wrote the script, and I was focused on production, and I could just hand it off. And I spoke to her and tried to see also who she's comfortable, being on the screen with, especially for the kiss scene and all of that. And that's actually her partner. So it kind of worked perfectly. They were both great. They were so great to work with. And Donna, at a certain moment, she wasn't going to participate because she had just a week before removed her braces. She was like, I can't put braces back on. It became a whole thing, and we tried to turns out that the person that we wanted to put the braces on for her was her doctor. So everything worked out. Everything was fine. But yeah, they were incredible to collaborate with.
That's amazing. So I'm curious, with the parents, but also the teenagers, how do you see yourself in them as you're writing the film, but also directing it? Do you see yourself at all in their characters?
Definitely. And, it's not based on a real story, but it's based on a lot of things that we grew up living, and things that we used to say to each other, like when they're sitting by the beach and they're by the water and they're talking, and Sammy, who's the Sharif character, is saying oh, you never know what's going to happen, one day this explodes, and those are conversations that we used to have. Or the flirting while using colors, because all the different parties had colors in Lebanon. So I definitely see myself in all of them, and I think more and more I see myself in the parents. I think even the conversation of will they leave, will they stay, the mom is trying to get them to leave, even if it's a quick thing that, it's just one quick scene that she hears off screen, but it is a question that I have right now, will I return to Lebanon and just stay there despite everything that happens sometimes, or will I stay in New York? And yeah,
that's interesting. So the film has this coming of age tone to it, kind of a universality of what it's like to have braces as a teenage girl, or fight with your mom, or have a crush, and yet it's in such a specific situation that is Lebanon. Was that a conscious choice to make this seem so universal in the midst of their situation?
Definitely. I mean, it's the story of a first kiss, right? And everyone has a different story of the first kiss. It's not necessarily always a good story. But it is, I think this is, making this film, and when I was writing it, I was thinking, we're gonna have two audiences. I'm gonna have the Lebanese audience, and I need them to feel how authentic this film is, and hopefully they're probably going to be my harshest critic at this point, because they want to make sure that everything is, authentic, is true to the history and to the experience. And at the same time, while doing this, I was hoping, I would have international audiences who would understand that this is a story that happened in Lebanon, but it's also not far from someone who would have grown up anywhere else in the world, just trying to have their first kiss and lying to their parents, and something happens, whether it's an explosion or God forbid, a car accident, or whatever it is, things happen. And this is why it was so important to push the tone, the coming of age tone in the film, where you have, even the whole opening with them flirting, with her thinking about him, with the lockers shot, all of those things were very important for us to get, because when you watch it, it's something familiar to audiences. They know that this is what it is, but it's also set in a place that they're not very familiar with. And it's, it was just an attempt to get away from what you think of when you think of an Arab film or a Lebanese film. And, even right now you see all the destruction and all of that, but it's not always like this. That's not how we grew up. So, yeah.
Right. Thank you. So let's turn it to the audience. Do we have anybody with a question? We might take a couple. We've got back here in the purple.
How much did the setting play importance in the film? I noticed it almost acts as a character in itself in a way. They're interacting with both the setting and how their own world, How much did that play importance in how you wrote and like directed the film?
It was definitely at the forefront as I was writing and developing the story. I mean, from the title, Ebb and Flow, because I wanted to have the element of the water in the film, because I grew up by the water like my entire life, and it was such an important part of everywhere we used to go to, and like everything that we, you know, how we would schedule our day and our lives. And so it was definitely very important, and I wanted to kind of bring that out as much as possible. It goes a little bit to what we were saying, like staying away from you expect to see when you hear Beirut in the news or when you hear something like that, you know, but also trying to hopefully be as authentic to the setting as possible, right? There were a lot of, I had a sense of where the streets would be, and we tried to go, when we were scouting, not all the shots made it in, but when we were scouting, this was shot after the August 2020 explosion in Beirut, and there was a lot of destruction then, and we tried to scout some places around there that would just like show a little bit of that. So it was definitely, I'm very glad that you're saying that it's coming across as a character, because it was definitely something that felt very important for the story and for the authenticity to come across.
One more question we have right here.
I'm wondering, what were the reflective questions you had in mind for parents to ponder on? I'm a parent, and I have a girl child. And I was just reflecting, and my heart was panting, thinking for my daughter, you know, years down the line. So I'm wondering, what questions did you, reflective questions do you want parents to ponder on as you were producing the movie? And because I'm left with more questions now, the way the movie ended.
Your kid's never going out. That's what I get. I mean, I don't know if there's anything specific. I would say, like from growing up, from seeing my niece now, from seeing my cousins now, I think, and reflecting on how I grew up in Lebanon, kids are going to do whatever they want to do. And I think that whether we like it or not, like they're going to find ways to, that's what we did, right? Like you're going to find ways to do whatever you want despite what your parents tell you, if they say yes or if they say no. And I think what I hope the most, is I feel like I can only speak to, being an aunt right now. I just hope that there's some communication that can happen, with my niece or like with my future kids, like what, rather than fear or lying, maybe let's talk about things and let's, see how communication can maybe bring us closer. But then again, I know that there is the authority of parents, right? And like, you're not always the kid's friend, you're their parent. I think, it's just, there is a reality that we live in. Again, wherever we are in the world, and Lebanon happens to be with the explosions, or war, or everything. And I think it's one thing that I really appreciated that my parents did is that they never downplayed it. They were always very honest with me and my sister. It's like, yeah, you know what, it is scary and it's not a good time, but it doesn't mean that our life stops right now. And there was a time when they were just, they're the generation of the Civil War, so they also had a version of this experience. But at no point were they leading us to complete freak out or leading us to like complete disillusionment with what's happening. It was always, if we had a question, they would answer the question. They would be very honest, no matter how hard it would be, but also comfort us that they are there and there's some presence. So, yeah, I think this was one of the reasons why I felt like I needed that last shot of the, not very final one, but in that last scene of the mother and the daughter coming together in the end, because they have similar fears, it's just different concerns in a sense.
Thank you guys for your questions. Last thing I'd like to ask, you've told me some about how your family is doing in Lebanon, and you've talked today about you grappling with if you might return, or I'm curious, how does Ebb and Flow speak to the reality of Lebanon today, and how is your family there?
Thankfully, they're okay. It is unfortunately a cyclical experience that we've been going through. Again, my parents is the generation of the Civil War. My generation is the consistent bombings and political assassinations that were taking place. And the generation right now that's coming up is from explosion to financial crisis to a war right now to complete destruction. And it feels heavy to feel like this movie is actually still still relevant, and for the wrong reasons in a sense. And I just hope, that there's some sort of representation that we're able to bring to the screen that is beyond the destruction, and also, talking about these things, because I think there is a certain perspective that isn't necessarily always thought after, or there's just numbers and there's just the news of blood and destruction. And I hope the cycle ends. There's a lot of changes that are happening right now. I hope the cycle ends. I hope there's something new that comes up, but and I hope that I was talking to my production designer, and she's like, I thought that this was going to be the last time that we talk about these things, and I just hope that we do. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing the story with us.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes,
It was
thank
great.
you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.